Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at this wonderful, informative webinar on the legal process for name change in Maryland. We are presenting this, the MVLS Human Trafficking Prevention Project and the Judicare program, the Family Law Judicare program, are jointly presenting this program. And we have some wonderful speakers today, which I'd like to take a moment to introduce. First of all, we have with us today Chris Rahl, who is a member and attorney with Gordon Feinblatt. And he has an extensive bio, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about him before we begin. Chris is a chair of the firm's Financial Services Practice Group and a member of the following teams: Financial Services, Healthcare, and Emerge. He is a trusted advisor who serves outside general counsel to several highly regulated enterprises. To that end, Chris helps clients manage risk and identify and implement proactive solutions to complex problems. Chris has extensive in-house counsel experience that includes having served as general counsel for an enterprise holding company and its subsidiaries, and as corporate counsel in the financial services industry. His familiarity with the challenges and demands of the in-house counsel role uniquely positions him to help companies develop and implement creative strategies to reach their business goals efficiently and effectively. Chris Rahl is also one of our very respected panel members for MVLS, volunteer attorneys. So thank you, Chris, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Heather Heiman is one of our very own MVLS attorneys who oversees and manages the Human Trafficking Prevention Project here at MVLS. Which is, by the way, MVLS, if you don't already know, the largest provider of pro bono civil legal services in the state. She provides direct representation to HTPP clients and facilitates case placement with volunteer attorneys through MVLS's pro bono network. She has spearheaded HTPP community outreach in the Baltimore area and co-hosts monthly legal clinics with community partners, as well as training extensively on criminal record relief, credit repair, as other topics related to civil legal services for trafficking survivors and individuals in the commercial sex industry. Prior to joining MVLS, Heather was a senior public policy attorney and forced marriage initiative project manager at Tahira Justice Center, where she advocated to improve legal protections for survivors of gender-based violence at both the national and state level. Heather received her JD from DePaul University of Law in Chicago. Welcome to both of you. And last but not least, I might add, my name is Nancy Grimm, and I oversee the Maryland Volunteer Lawyers Service Judicare program. I want to just mention to you that we are always, for those of you who are volunteers with MVLS, thank you. And for those who are interested in becoming volunteers, we certainly would appreciate you contacting us and letting us know of your interest. The Judicare program is a program that compensates volunteer attorneys for their work in handling and representing those clients with contested divorce and custody cases. What is required in order to be a member of that panel is that the attorney who is volunteering must have at least 3 years of experience in these types of cases, or has been mentored for 2 years by an identified MVLS volunteer Judicare attorney. If you need more information on that, we will provide you with information in which to contact us, and we'll be happy to give you more information on that topic. I will now turn this program over to Heather, who has a few other housekeeping topics to mention. I do want to mention one thing. Questions will be taken through the chat. If you would like to pose a question, please place it in the chat and I will be monitoring those questions and we will entertain them as we go along. Heather, I turn the program over to you at this point. Thank you for being here, both of you.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and thanks, Chris, for being here. This is an exciting joint venture of our family law program and the Human Trafficking Prevention Project here at MVLS, like Nancy said. And it's great, too, because there are so many overlaps in the services that we provide. Our clients coming through the HTPP are often needing help with complex family law matters and sometimes little simpler ones. You know, name changes fall under that rubric of in the family law sphere here in Maryland. That's where they go to when they go to petitions go to court. And so it's great to be able to discuss this jointly. This is part of our HTPP quarterly webinar series. And so it's nice to see folks from the anti-trafficking community joining us today, as well as attorneys and advocates from around the state. As Nancy mentioned, questions in the chat, and this is being recorded and it will be available to be viewed later on MVLS's website, as well as the Human Trafficking Prevention Project's website. We'll also have the slides posted up too, so don't worry too much about taking notes. Sit back, enjoy the conversation, and feel free to participate. We love that. So I think we'll jump in with our first slide.
Stay with me, stay with me. There we go.
All right, so why change your name? Why would somebody want to do this? And then we'll dive it further into how this is done. But I think it's important to start, you know, at the beginning as we talk about this topic. You know, as attorneys and advocates, we want to be letting the client be in the driver's seat and you know, trusting their decisions about choices they want to make for their future lives, for their safety, for their privacy, whatever the reason may be. And there's a lot of reasons why people may decide to change their name and need to go through that court process here in the state. As I said, it might be just because you want to, you know, maybe you just, the name you have doesn't fit you, you just want to change it. There's no problem with that. You don't need any specific reason to be able to petition the court and change a name here in Maryland. Though there are sometimes processes, events, life moments that people are going through that make them want to change their name. For example, you're getting married, you're separating or getting a divorce, there's an adoption in the works. For a lot of the HTPP clients that we are serving, we see people who are needing to change their name for their safety, for a sense of privacy, or maybe turning over a page in their journey. And so it can be very important for them to be able to have this option. We also see, you know, a lot and help a lot of folks who are wanting to change their name as part of changing their gender designation. And we'll touch a little bit on that as we're talking through the name change process. But that could be and is by both us and some of our wonderful colleagues around the state, Trans Maryland, Free State Justice, doing this kind of work. That's a whole nother process and discussion. But sometimes the two are coupled. So it's good to know that that might be a reason why people are approaching you for help. The two caveats we have, though, is that there are some things that the court does frown on and that will potentially bar you from changing your name. And those two exceptions are if you are trying to change your name for the purpose of fraud or for an illegal purpose, and if you're trying to change your name in a way that might interfere with the rights of somebody else. You know, for example, if somebody's changing their name to try and take the name of another person and say, capitalize on business or economic opportunities, something like that, by having this person's name become their own, you can't do that. But these kinds of situations are very rare. But just good to be aware of them.
Just a couple things to add. Back to the not changing your name to interfere with the rights of someone else. It would be difficult to change your name to Taylor Swift right now. You don't want to try that. And
or Madonna.
Yeah, Madonna, sure.
Beyonce.
Exactly. The other things I've seen people want to change their name for reasons. A lot of times a mother will find that the name of the child, it was put on the birth certificate thinking that a particular father was the biological father. Paternity will show up later that person is not the biological father. So the mother will want to change the minor's name back to the maiden name of the child. I've done a bunch of those. I've had adults who decide they don't like their middle name and want to change their middle name completely to something different, or adults, I've had 40, 50-year-old folks who decide that they just want to simplify their name. They don't like their last name. It's too long. They're trying to Americanize their names. I had a family of 4 kids where the parents wanted to try to shorten and more Americanize some kids' first and last names. That kind of thing can come up as well. So just wanted to add those before we go to the next slide. Good, when you're ready, Nancy.
I would like to mention one other thing, if you don't mind. I have situations whereby a parent may want to change the name of a child because the name that the child has may interfere with them moving on in life. For example, if the child is the son of Ted Bundy and has the name Theodore Bundy, that child may be allowed to change that name because it would inhibit or prohibit that child from moving on in life. Just a thought.
Yep. Thank you. So to the next slide, and Heather, I can start with this.
Sure.
And back to Nancy's great introduction and description of my background. A lot of you are probably thinking, what does he know about name changes? And that should just be a testament to how anyone can do name changes. And it was a thing that was different than what I do during the day. And I wanted to learn about it back in the day. And so just want to comfort you all that it's a mechanical process that's pretty easy to do with some templates that are available. So don't be daunted by the petition and the steps. So generally, you file a petition. The petition has to be filed in the county where the person seeking the name change lives or where they carry on regular business. There are some different rules for adoption, divorce, and gender identity declarations, which we'll touch on as we get through. But generally, the caption is an explanation of what it is you're trying to do. It's the name of the petition. The matter is basically saying, my name is X, I want to change it to Y. And then it goes through basic details about what's involved. Name and address, place of birth where the person who wants to change their name was born. Have they ever been known by another name? What they want to change their name to? Some reasons about the name change. You got to promise that you're not doing it for bad reasons. And then there are some different rules for minors. We'll get into more details about the minor piece. You'll see the note at the bottom of the slide about publication or posting no longer being required in Maryland. Heather and I can both tell you that the prior format was a pain. The rules said that you had to publish this notice in a paper of general circulation, and the clerk was supposed to issue something after you filed your petition that you then would cause to go to the Daily Record. It cost money. It took time. Depending on what court you were in, it never worked like it was supposed to, and you had to follow up with the clerk many times to say, did this thing get transmitted? Did you get it back? So now it's much better. There was a mechanism where you could ask the court to do notice differently than publication, where you at times could ask them to do it by posting, and you'd get permission, post a notice in the courthouse somewhere and let that sit for 30 days and then move on without publishing. My experience with the posting format and mechanics, it worked for me for many years with adults and children trying to change their names. In most cases I took, which were either in Baltimore County or Baltimore City, then something happened and the court clerks got wise, or the masters got wise, and they started catching them, and they would start kicking them back for adults, and they would make me publish for adults, but they'd still let me post for minors. I guess they thought the risk of a minor trying to hide from creditors was less than an adult maybe changing their name. So anyway, but you don't have to worry about all of that, which is nice, because now those requirements are gone, thankfully.
And it's funny, Chris, like I feel like the change happened with very little fanfare in some ways. And but it's such a significant thing for people. I mean, all the clients that I talked to prior to the change, like we can get general court fees waived often, but the fee to publicize is over $100. And that was really prohibitive for some people to get that publication in the Daily Record. And it was intimidating too, particularly if you're concerned for safety or privacy, to have to put that information out there. And so this change is very welcome, and it has really streamlined the process of getting a name change in Maryland quite a bit too. It makes it a lot less fraught.
I totally agree. Nancy, next slide, please.
Oh, could I just jump in with one additional thing? Just noting the documents you need. It was the last line on the last slide that you needed a
attachments,
copy
yeah.
of. An official identification document, right? Birth certificate, copy of your state ID or driver's license. Just so people know, this doesn't have to be a certified copy. This can just be a photocopy. I've had people, as long as you can even take a picture of something with your phone and mail it to the attorney you're working with if you have, or print it out. As long as it's, a clear image, it lets them see the information, that's relevant to the document, then that's usually accepted by the court. So don't think you have to go and get like an official or certified copy of any of those documents.
Before we move to the next slide, there is a question. And the question is that just a function of changes in technology, meaning the posting of notices, given that we don't post notices in newspapers anymore like we used to?
I think so. I think that's largely it.
Yeah,
But
I
Heather,
agree with that too. I think it's more fraught now, right? If you were forcing people to publish in the newspaper, it's not like before where the newspaper was printed and then kind of discarded. If you really wanted to hunt for someone, you'd have to go find microfilm. You know what I mean? It used to be a much more challenging process to research. Now, if someone's forced to publicize in the newspaper, that exists generally online forever. Right. So I think that might have been a consideration too. And because of technology as well, like, the credit bureaus and creditors can generally link, there's enough public information out there on the internet to link people. So I think there's not as much concern about people being able to evade debt, evade creditors, as there was in the past.
Thank you.
all right, next slide. So Heather, I can start again on the minors if you
go
like.
ahead.
Yeah. I did a stretch at MVLS where I did a lot of name changes for minors, to where the MVLS paralegals nicknamed me Name Change Boy for a while. So
He's a resident expert.
I think, and it was mostly for minors. And so on the minor side, your petition looks like we just described on the prior slide, but you also need a little bit more information about why. First, you have usually one of the parents is filing the petition on behalf of the minor. There's got to be a statement explaining why the person filing believes that the name change is in the best interest of the minor. You've got the name and address material as well. And then the consent thing, it's easier when you're changing the name of a minor if you have both parents, they've signed some consent forms, you file those consent forms with your petition. It doesn't always work like that, because sometimes one, custodial parent's trying to change the name of the minor. The non-custodial parent is on the outs with the custodial parent and oftentimes won't consent or can't be found. But if you can get both parents to sign the right consent form and file with the petition, the petition sails through a lot quicker. There are some there's some consent parts for the minor based on how old they are. If the minor's at least 10 years old, then you've got to include in your petition whether the minor consents to the name change. If the minor is younger than 10 years old, you've got to include whether they object to the name change. So be mindful of those little caveats to the minor type petitions. Let's see, Heather, do you want to add anything there? I mean, there's a sealing part if you're worried about changing the name and you're trying to keep parts of it confidential.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a little bit more fraught, because of the court's expectation that, both parents or any guardians or custodians, will be involved. And that's where we've seen issues with this, with cases through the HTPP, primarily in situations where we just can't find the parent. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. But it just makes the process a little bit more challenging, not insurmountable, and it depends on each case's unique circumstances, but it definitely can be more challenging. And it's something that's worth talking through with clients before you proceed. Just let them know what the requirements are, what they can expect, what the judge may be expecting, in terms of attempts to find engagement with the other parent, if that's something that might be causing safety or privacy concerns.
Thank you for that. And while we're talking about what to expect for the client, probably a good time to mention this process will take anywhere between a month and 6 months, I guess is the answer on to see it through. It depends a lot on where you're filing and whether you have all the pieces together on the front end, whether you don't have a parental consent, for instance, will take longer. But my experience is if you are in Baltimore City, you can have a name change take 3, 4, 5 months, depending on what's required. You may have to call the clerk multiple times to ask the clerk, where's the file? Can you move the file to the next step? In some cases, they sail right through. So it really is, it really does vary, but I think it's worth warning your client at the outset. Sometimes this can get done in 6 weeks. Sometimes it takes 3 months or more. So just be prepared. I think it's a good
Yeah, and
warning.
I'd say on average lately, we've been seeing it take like 2 to 3 months if it's just an adult requesting a name change, and then it tends to veer into the closer to 6-month range if there's a minor and there's any problems. I will also say with Baltimore City's recent switch to MDEC, I've noticed that creating complications in court systems as they've been switching over. So things might be just taking a little bit longer, or you might need more aggressive follow-up with the court during these next months.
Yep. Thank you. Nancy, next slide. So still on the minor name change topic, if you have a situation where you don't have consents from both parents, there are things that you can do. You can provide the consent of the custodial parent, that's the petitioner, and then provide some kind of an explanation about why you don't have the consent from the second parent. You generally want to you have to try to serve a copy of the petition on a non-consenting parent. So that's another step that you're going to have to take if you don't have the consents. Another reason to try to get it. There is also a requirement that you reference whether the non-consenting party is unfamiliar with the English language. If so, there's a multilingual advisement form that the court has that must be provided as well. When you try to serve the petition on the non-consenting parent. Generally, you're not changing the relationship between the parents by changing the minor's name. You're just changing the minor's name. There is a weird thing you can do if a child is less than 1 year old. You get one freebie where you can go back and change the child's name one time within the child's first year without a court order. But you need both parents that are listed on the birth certificate submitting a written request to make that work. So sometimes that helps. Next slide, please, Nancy.
Mm-hmm. And just a quick note with the minors and some of the challenges, like we've had times with certain cases with HTPP where we've absolutely not been able to find the other parent. They've left the country. We've done research into where they could have gone. Multiple internet searches, exploring any last known address. For us, sometimes it's very complicated because there are occasionally situations where, finding that other parent can also be very fraught, especially if the individual was abusive or exploitative towards our client. And so we've been able to, you know, show the kind of due diligence efforts to find the parents, document that for the court. But we have never been able to totally get that parental notification requirement waived. What the court has compromised with in the past is allowing for a posting of notice about the change. Not ideal if someone's concerned about their safety, but we haven't been able to, despite, you know, very diligent efforts, been able to persuade the courts to entirely waive that requirement.
When I've had cases like that where the one parent can't be found to get the consent, even when you have trouble serving them a copy of the petition, I've done a lengthy affidavit that explains all the due diligence steps that you just mentioned to try to describe to the court, man, we really tried. We looked here, we looked there, we checked relatives.
Yeah.
None of it worked. You got to help us here. So
Yeah.
I think an affidavit like that gets you the summary of what you've done in front of the court, and then you can try to do that alternative posting as a last ditch effort. So on the adoption side, generally the adoption piece, there's a request in the adoption proceeding that would involve the change in the name once the adoption's been granted. And then my understanding, I've never done an adoption myself, but my understanding is that the court itself in the adoption proceeding issues a notice that goes right to the Division of Vital Records, so that the Division of Vital Records is on notice of the changed name. I don't think you have to do anything else as part of the adoption. Nancy, Heather, either of you know any more about the adoption name change part? I mean, I know.
I don't personally. Yeah,
Okay.
I do think it's, from what I've read and what I understand about it, it's a little more integrated
With the adoption, yeah.
Yeah, with the adoption, which is nice, but I'm sure there's still follow-up that has to happen to ensure all the records are issued and updated correctly.
Yep, I agree. Nancy, next step. Thank you so much. Serving a petition for a minor. Again, if you have both parents consenting, you're not having to do this. But if you have one that's not, then this is the process that you'd follow to try to serve a copy of the petition on the non-consenting parent. And then I think that we have a slide coming up after the objection piece. We have a couple back that we'll point to when we get to it that talks more about the posting and the notice of posting if you have to go that route. But I think, Nancy, I think you can go to the next slide about objections. Thank you. So there is a process for someone to object to a petition to change a name, and this slide outlines the requirements of the rule, just describing what the person can do. There are time limits. There's a requirement to file the objection within a specified time period, and then the petitioner has a short window to then respond to the objection. On the minor side, if you have one of these situations where there's a non-consenting parent, they get notice of the petition and that the other parent is seeking to change the minor's name, that non-consenting parent has 30 days to file an objection. If they don't, then they're deemed to have consented to it. So that's built into the rule.
And while this is still here, and I do think that's where, again, getting rid of that publication requirement is just so huge. It really cuts down on the frivolous or, harassing objections that might be filed that was occasionally a problem in the past. So it's good that this procedure is still there. Of course, if someone has some kind of legitimate grounds or interests that they need to raise, concerns, but I don't think it's used very frequently. I've never had a case where there's been an objection outside of parent. So.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah, same. Okay, next slide, please. This slide just details the applicable rules, process concerning whether there's going to be a hearing or not. Most of the time, there's not going to be a hearing on a petition like this. If it's an adult, the court can't deny a petition without holding a hearing, but often they're just going to enter an order after they have all the material they need. And then in the minor context, I'm just trying to recall, I've never had a hearing be held for a name change, even when you've had an objecting parent, because the petitioner then files a response. I'm trying to remember whether we had a hearing at that. Hey, Heather, what do you think?
I think, I mean, the occasions that I know where there's been hearings is again, where there's been difficulty locating the other parent. And so the court has wanted to review what efforts were made, but that's also, you know, it is kind of court by court and judge by judge, right? What they determine. And I think that is a myth that's important to dispel. I think there is a lot of people out there think that if you're going to try to change your name, it's like automatically you have to have a hearing, you have to go to court, which is very intimidating for people a lot of the time. So it's nice to know that, you know, unless kind of all these things happen, and you can usually project that with your client. Okay, we could see maybe there being some issues down the road that could lead to a hearing, but generally you petition to change your name, there's not a hearing. You petition to change the name of yourself and your kid. If the other parent, you know what I mean, is notified, doesn't object, there's not going to be a hearing. The orders will just be issued.
Yep. Thank you. All right, Nancy, next slide. We talked about these alternate service methods and documenting what your due diligence efforts were so that you can explain what you've tried to try to get notice. And this has been my experience as well, that you try a couple of times and that's usually good enough. You show that you did a diligent search with phone and internet records and searches, and then you prepare an affidavit.
Yeah, but you don't have to like hire a private detective. You don't
Right.
have to hire a process
Right.
server. I mean, again, there's limits, right? Like generally
Yeah.
the courts aren't going to ask you to take extraordinary steps, right? If you really can't find someone, you've documented your efforts. So that's good to know too, because again, that's a worry that prevents people from looking for this or for asking for this, right? So we want to kind of dispel some of those concerns.
Perfect. Thank you. Nancy, next slide. All right, this is the posting reference again. We oftentimes back in the day, you would ask the court to not do publication. You try to do it with posting. Here, you would use it as a last ditch resort if you can't get service on somebody. If you think that nobody reads the notice pages in the back of the daily record, even less people go by the bulletin board in the courthouse wherever these notices are posted. So for fun, I've thought about going to look for the bulletin board when I'm in a courthouse, but I always forget to go look and see where it might be just to see what's up there. But I think not many people are going to see it, but it is an alternative.
The place I've had this come up as a concern is when there's been like gang involvement or where there's been like, again, kind of a more extraordinary situation where someone is concerned about there being people potentially at the courthouse or seeing things or learning things through different chains. But yeah, otherwise it's not somewhere that the casual person, even a person who's, you know, in the court building would see or be stopping to closely examine. So it is that kind of final alternative that we can do, and it's usually doesn't run that much of a risk.
Yeah. And then I think the next slide has a sample of what the order would look like, and with a notice that you would post on the bulletin board. The sheriff puts it up, basically saying, hey, this person's trying to change their name. You've got, you know, usually it's a short window. This one says 15 days to come and complain about it if you think you have a basis to complain. But again, short notice in case you ever need it. There's a sample form there.
Yeah, it's not something that you do often though anymore, which is great.
Nah. And then this part of the slide deck has some form numbers and names and, you know, a link to where you can go and get them. That's a helpful.
And props to
Okay.
Maryland courts. I mean, I do feel like they have been getting their websites a little bit better organized, making them more user-friendly. They have things categorized by topic now. They have a whole kind of, changing your name section on the Maryland courts website. That's that first link. You can find all the different forms you might need. They have some nice walkthroughs. They've been producing videos. They also have a specific page that's dedicated to a judicial declaration of gender identity. And when you request that, you can also ask for a name change as part of that process. It's not two separate petitions, which is nice. And it's also automatically sealed, which is also great. So, and yes, I see a question popped up. We will be able to, there'll be a copy of the presentation available on our website. We can also send out slides. But this is just a nice reference slide to kind of see where everything's located. And the Maryland Courts website is pretty comprehensive.
Great. And then I think we're on to sealing on the next slide. So this is, you know more about this than I do, Heather.
Sure, yeah, I'll jump into this. A name change is like any court proceedings. It is a public record, right? So we want to be conscious of that. And if you're working with a client who's considering doing it on their own, considering getting attorney help, if you're an attorney, be conscious of what might be in the best interest of the client, and be sure to always explain that you potentially seal the records so that they're not publicly searchable. There is a separate, called the petition to seal or otherwise limit inspection of a case record that can be filed concurrently with the petition to change one's name. And we have a link to that court form. It's funny. It's just like the name change form, it asks like, what are all of the reasons for you changing your name? What are all the reasons you wish to seal? I just want to encourage people to know that you can be minimal with this, right? Like you don't have to write a paragraph, tell your life story, revisit past trauma. I have, for both the reasons why you want to change your name, I have written things with clients that just say, because it is the way that I am publicly known, because it is, you can just have a short sentence. And it's the same with sealing. You can request all records related to the matter, to the proceedings to be sealed. What I generally put, if somebody does have concerns about safety, privacy, I just write that down, that we are requesting this to be sealed due to concerns around privacy and safety. That's it, just that little phrase. And the courts will usually accept that. They're not going to ask you to rehash your history or any past trauma. The one thing that can sometimes be a hiccup is there is a section of the sealing, the motion or the petition to seal that is asking whether immediate, substantial, and irreparable harm will result if the requested records are not sealed immediately. Sometimes we check yes to that. Sometimes we check no. I have not really had problems with any particular courts when we've asked for things to be sealed immediately. Otherwise, I think it takes a certain number of days until the record is sealed. So it's just something to be aware of, and it's something you can talk through with an attorney that's helping your client or you, or if you're an attorney, talk through with your client. This is another area where you would have to notify the other parent if you're petitioning for a minor, but you can redact identifying information from a petition. For example, we have a fair amount of clients that are enrolled in the address confidentiality program. They have other protections in place where they don't want to share their current location, or they might not wish to share certain information, and usually the courts are pretty flexible with that. These things, though, can occasionally trigger a hearing. So, if there's objections, if there's confusion, just to be aware of that and talk through that with the client. You can also attach supporting evidence if you would like to. You can provide as much info as you want, right? Now, of course, that should all hopefully be sealed, be conscious of what you're giving to the court, but you can attach supporting evidence. And like it says in that last bullet, these requests are generally decided without a hearing. If there are questions the court has, if there's been, objections filed in the case, it might get a little bit more complicated and there might be a hearing. But in my view, it's always, if there's any concerns, even small ones, I think it's good to ask for these records to be sealed.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, Nancy, I think we can go to the next slide.
Okay. There we go.
All right, misspellings. Now, I see what this slide says, but in practical application, it has never worked for me. I've never been able to get Division of Vital Records to correct what is the client perceives as a misspelling without going and doing a full name change. I've only tried it for adults, and it's been a couple of times, and it could be just the particular facts of the ones that I worked on, but it didn't work. The Vital Records folks were never satisfied that it was just a misspelling. They thought that the person didn't like what was on the birth certificate, and they said, we need a court order. But it's possible that you could make this work in some situations where it's clear there's a typo and a letter's missing. And there's definitely a procedure that should work for a child that's under 7 years old. That should be easier to do. I just have never tried it. I don't know if you have, Heather, had any experience with misspellings and having success.
Yeah, I feel like I've known one or two people who have met, if it's just been like one letter missing, like, a very minor misspelling, I think they've had luck being able to show other documents that were accurate with, employers or another official identifying document. But if it's something that's been across the border, it was, a misspelled, a misspelling on a birth certificate that then rippled through other documents, that has not worked, and there's had to be a name change order.
That's what happened with me. Is it started on the birth certificate, it never got fixed, and then somebody was trying to fix it. It showed up all through their social security card, the driver's license, the whole works. So
yeah. Well, and that's where to remember that you have that within that first year, you can make that fix. So
one free.
If you have a child, know anyone that has a child, check out that birth certificate, make sure it's accurate, because you can go and get it fixed very easily. Then it gets challenging the further out you get.
Sounds good. There is some authority there for children under 7 years old submitting one of these documents listed here, and it's things like a notarized letter from a parent citing the correct name, notarized letter from the hospital, notarized letter from an attendant at birth, a doctor's notarized certificate, that sort of thing. Again, I've never tried that, but at least there is a process there for it. And I think next slide, Nancy, please. This is continued. If there's somebody 7 years or older, then the process calls for submitting 2 or more of these things listed here, which cite the correct name. And again, for the adults that I've tried this with, no bueno, it didn't work. But in theory, it is possible. And these are the kinds of things that you would cobble together to submit with a request. But anything else on this, Heather, Nancy?
No, I mean, I think it's potentially worth trying if somebody wants to run down to the Office of Vital Records. And again, it might be court by court. You know what I mean? Like it just depends. I think it's worth a try if you don't want to go through that full name change petition process. So just good to know. And sometimes it is something so small, a letter or two, or something juxtaposed. Yeah. So that I think you'd have a lot easier of a time with, as opposed to like an egregious difference.
And if we go to the next slide, there's a note here that missing names are treated like the misspellings in theory, that you can go get them fixed without going through the full name change process if you pull together the documents like you'd use for the misspelling and submit them. If anybody tries it and it works, I would love for them to let me know.
Yeah.
But anyway, the process is there. It's outlined in the rules. So, okay, Nancy, next slide. marriage. We've got a question there. To Governor Moore's wife. All right, so somebody with a good sense of humor. So in the marriage situation, the changing to the married name, if you can use a copy of the marriage certificate, just have a certified copy, and usually can present that to the DMV and to the Division of Vital Records, and they'll update those for you without a court order. And then if we go to the next slide, to divorce.
Stay with me. There we go.
Yep, sorry, Nancy. So it's easy to get the name, the married name on the front end. On the back end, it takes a little bit more work on the divorce side. You can request a name change as part of the divorce, and then the divorce decree you'd take as proof. And if you haven't asked for your name to be changed in the original divorce petition, there's a process where you can ask for your name to be restored to your maiden name up to 30 days before the actual hearing in the divorce proceeding. And then if you go through the whole divorce and you hadn't asked for your name to be restored, there's an 18-month window where you can make a request to, once you have the final absolute divorce decree, you can make a request within that 18-month window to get your name restored. And again, there's no requirement to post or publish anything with those. Let's see. Heather, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, Maryland law, particularly related to the criminal code, does have some requirements. If somebody has changed their name, if you have, for any reason, been required to register with local law enforcement, for example, if you are, a sex offender list, if you are on probation, then you do need to update the correct official bodies about the name change and officially register. They want you to do it quickly within 3 days. And then there's some examples of, individuals who are facing these particular circumstances, that they need to take this step. It's just something to be aware of. Again, especially with some of the clients that we're working with the Human Trafficking Prevention Project that are dealing with the after impacts of being criminalized while they were being victimized. It's just something to be aware of. But generally, this isn't going to apply to most of the population or most of the clients you might be working with.
Thank you. Nancy, next slide. Back to what we were chatting about before with the adoption being a little bit different. The adoption mechanics of changing the child's name is usually easier, as part of the adoption pleading will ask for this, and then there's a adoption decree that gets kicked out, and my understanding is the court actually files it with Division of Vital Records, and so Division of Vital Records will update the child's birth certificate records to reflect the new adopted name. So that piece is easier and would be done as part of the adoption. So outside of this process to file a separate petition. So I think that takes us to costs. And now that we no longer have the publication costs, that's a big chunk of it. And we have filing fee is listed here. If you're doing this kind of a proceeding for a pro bono client, you can, like through MVLS, you can use there's a filing fee waiver that's easy to use, and so you can avoid this. Anything else, Heather?
There are general filing fee waivers that, if you're going, yourself to try and petition for a name change, you can also file this filing fee waiver form. It's a little bit longer and more in depth. Whereas if you're going through an organization like MVLS or other legal aid organizations, we have a shorter form that we can do to get the prepaid costs waived. So this is just a nice benefit of, you know, in addition to having a volunteer attorney to help advocate for you, or volunteers is another great thing that you can do. Being a pro bono representative for a client, it's just help get that fee waived, usually very easily. We have occasionally seen some issues where courts have said that the fee waiver, which was approved, was only for prepay costs, and that there still had to be final costs of the $160 paid or waived. And it's caused some confusion. It's very judge by judge. We have gotten clarification from, you know, higher up in the judiciary that the prepaid filing fee waiver should be sufficient to cover both those things. If you ever encounter this issue, please do feel free to reach out and let us know, because we have intervened in the past with, you know, chief judges to get that clarification and to make sure that the petitions can move forward. If for whatever reason, you know, there is a fee, or there's some other issue, there is the PBRC litigation fund can also be used. I don't think that's generally going to be as needed as it used to be. You know, sometimes when there was, say, a publication fee that somebody couldn't meet, we were able to use the PBRC fund. But I feel like between the fee waiver and now there's no requirement for publication, it becomes a pretty cost-free process for most clients to be able to get their name changed through a legal aid organization here in the state.
I agree. That's been my experience as well. Back before the filing fee waiver was a thing, I had a couple where I was doing posting instead of publication, and the court came back and said that the sheriff's fee was not waived. And so you end up having to come figure out, do a separate waiver request for the $30 fee, or end up paying it. So.
And I mean, the cost that I see nowadays, it's for getting the certified copies, you know, and it's interesting. Some courts will give you, if you have the filing fee waiver approved, or, you know, they will give you like free certified copies, or sometimes they're supposed to give you at least one. Sometimes they'll give you more. It does vary jurisdiction by jurisdiction, court by court. But that's the one cost I usually flag for my clients, is just, you want to make sure you have, you know, not just one of those certified name change orders. You want to have a few, and we'll talk about why in a slide or two.
Yeah, perfect
And
segue. Go ahead,
I did
Nancy.
want to mention that the PBRC litigation fund is, as Heather said, is available to you should you need it. And when you, we have a link on our website to that fund, but you can also just directly contact them. There is a form on their website that you need to complete, and you should be pretty explicit about what you need the funds for, and you will submit that, and then in a few days or a week or two, they will notify you if they will accept your request and sort of work with you in getting you the funds. So you should always check that out. They're very helpful, and I've never seen them turn anyone down yet, but I don't know if that's your experience, Heather. And
yeah, and you can do it before you do something. You know what I mean? We had attorneys who would reach out to them to ask if they could get help with that, you know, publication fee, and they'd said yes in the past.
Yes.
So I believe so. They're very gracious and flexible. I feel like, understanding the different financial challenges that crop up.
Yeah, and in the family law arena, costs could be a little more expensive, and they have 9 times out of 10, you know, provided the funding for whatever that is that the attorney is requesting.
Thank you for that. I think we can move to the next slide, and back to the getting multiple copies of the decree, the final order. My experience is court, depending on the court, most times they'll send out 2 copies with the when they're issuing the decree. they have the fancy gold seal on it, which I'm sure that's why they're trying not to send too many of them out, or they're trying to charge you for more because it has to cost them money to get all these
There's a fancy gold seal.
gold
This is true.
seals, and then the effort to squeeze it on there. But most times I've gotten two back when the matter is concluded,
Mhm.
and you then need to, first step is go to Division of Vital Records and get your birth certificate changed, and then you can go and do things with the MVA and Social Security as well.
Mhm.
What did I want to say? Division of Vital Records has an office on Reisterstown Road that most
Mhm.
people go to, just above Northern Parkway. That's where I've seen people go to get their birth certificate updated.
Yep. And you can make appointments there now, which makes the
Yeah.
wait times much quicker than it used to be.
Reisterstown Road Plaza, I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And we, just going back to folks who might be interested in a name change and a change of gender designation. This is where, we do assist a lot of clients who are getting the name change order and then are going through more of an administrative process for the gender designation change. And you can do that administratively just through forms with the Social Security Administration office, with the Office of Vital Records, but to cut down on costs and just the bureaucratic hassles, it's nice if you're going to be doing both to have the name change order first and be able to bring that with you or submit that as well, and then kind of take care of everything all at once. And we're happy to walk people through that, as well as, again, there is also then the option of getting a name change and gender designation change orders from the court. That might be more relevant if, say, you needed a court order in another state in order to be able to change your gender designation on certain documents, or so it can be a little bit complicated. We're happy to walk through that. We have a lot of great colleague organizations that do this work as well, but just wanted to flag that for people. And I also just wanted to say too, it's really important to think through who you need to notify. Not just these different government agencies, but the post office, your employers, educational institutions. If you need to get a copy of your diploma, do you want it to be showing your old name or your new name? The credit bureaus, credit reporting agencies, lots of different places, that doctors' offices, to be able to reflect what you currently want to be known as. So that's something also to map out. And that's, again, why I encourage people to get a couple of orders so that they have it in case they need to send things in or something gets lost, or just makes it easier in the long run.
Heather, that's a very important point. I changed my husband's name for him. I was involved in helping him change his name. And what happened was he was born with a name. He was born Joseph William. He changed his name periodically through his life, back and forth, from Joseph William to William Joseph. And what happened was, while his Social Security and his bank records and all of those sorts of things were under Joseph William, his military documents were under William Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, what a mess that was.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to your point, you really have to, while you're changing these things that come to mind right away. Oh, my driver's license, my Social Security, my banking records. There are so many other documents that you want to think about, and making sure that those agencies have your correct information and the name that you want to continue with once you change the name.
I want to take one quick minute. I see there's a few questions in the chat. My colleague Jess was asking, if somebody wants to change their name or successfully changes their name and then wants to petition for expungement of criminal records, or look into any other form of criminal record relief where the records might be under the former name, you can still get those records expunged or address them through whatever form of relief you're eligible for. Sometimes there can be confusion with the courts. Generally when we're assisting clients with those types of legal matters, it can be a little bit more challenging to wade through all the records that might be eligible for expungement or shielding or vacature, not eligible, blocking each other. sifting through the web of how they all interact when there's multiple names can be challenging. That's one reason, like here at the HTPP, we have money for fingerprint searches, so we can look at multiple databases, you know, an FBI fingerprint record, the Maryland Judiciary Case Search, Westlaw, People Search, like all the different places we can look, pull those together, and then sift through and help you with a criminal record relief case. If you are wanting to file on your own, what we, you know, suggest you do is always file under your legal name, right, that you have right now, and then just do the other as the former name as an AKA, but you want to be showing your legal name right now, as well as the name that was your legal name at the time that the record occurred. So, and we're happy to talk through that in more detail. If anyone ever needs to reach out for technical assistance or needs help with this process, we're here. There was one other question regarding the client reporting to law enforcement and the 3-day notification rule post changing name. Jacob was asking if if they're a victim of crime or if they've been processed by law enforcement upon arrival, if this was still something that was required. I don't have a ready answer to this question. I think if the individual is a victim of crime, you know, privacy should trump everything, I would hope, and that individual's choice. I don't think there would be a requirement, but I also can't say that for certain. Chris, Nancy, I don't know if you have any further insight into this.
Yeah, my gut is where you're going, which is, I think those situations where you have to give the 3-day notice, it's where you've got an active probation or you're a registered offender is what I think. I don't think if you've been processed before as a victim that you're going to have to notify of a name change, but that's just my gut, but I haven't looked into it either.
Heather, did you get Jessica's question?
Yes.
Also? All right. And there is yet another question. Do clients need to send a copy of the name change to every creditor if they have debts?
I haven't seen people do this. I've seen them notify the credit bureaus. The credit bureaus then update the credit file. The creditors then are reporting to the bureau and they see the info in the bureau is what I think happens. I don't think folks, I think you're going to go, of course, notify your own bank or credit union so that you can get your own deposit accounts updated and your credit cards reissued the way you want your name to show up. But other than that, I don't think you're picking off each creditor and giving them a specific notice about your name change.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any laws that say you have to do that. You know that the creditors will still probably try to find you. And the minute that you update your name with the post office in particular, that is, they do sell their data. That's why you get all those mailers and welcome to the neighborhood things if you update your address. So the connection with the internet the way it is, data sharing the way it is, that connection generally will be made. You know, with the credit bureaus, it's important. I have known of people who have changed their name because of mismatched information with the credit bureaus. It sent up kind of a flag within their internal systems, and it made them not be able to access or get approved for certain loans until that situation was sorted out. So it's something to think about, be aware of the complications. Of course, you know, you don't want to be changing your name to try to fraudulently get out of debt. But you don't have to let, I believe, every creditor specifically know when you've changed your name.
Yep.
Might be one more question. Oh, no, it's a thank you. All right.
And then I think the next slide has some resources. And
oh yeah, so
plea for
as Nancy and I
volunteers.
said, Chris, we so appreciate your pro bono service. To all the attorneys on the call who volunteer with MVLS or any other pro bono organization in Maryland. We so appreciate your service to clients. There's a lot of barriers to justice in the criminal and the criminal legal system, the civil legal system. And so it's always incredible to have attorney help, and it really increases people's chances of prevailing whatever action they're trying to pursue. So please sign up with MVLS. This is our portal that lists cases that are currently available. I will say I have one name change case right now I am trying to place through the HTPP here in Baltimore City. An individual we are working with who is needing her name changed for safety reasons, needing to get the proceedings sealed. If you're interested, please feel free to reach out to me. We have tons of other cases available as well. Nancy's always looking for new folks to join the Judicare and family law panels. And we're always looking for folks to deal with the varied types of legal situations that our HTPP clients face. So please feel free to check us out on our website. And I think the next slide.
I will mention one thing. I did earlier mention that the Judicare program compensates our attorneys for representing clients, but it is actually the only program currently at MVLS that compensates volunteer attorneys. And the amount is a fee of $4,200 per case, and that is works out to be $120 for the attorney's time per hour and $40 for any support staff per hour. I think it's important to know that we do always need Judicare attorneys. In fact, we're generally in dire need for Judicare attorneys. And not only there, but all across the organization. So I ask you to contact me or Heather or anyone at MVLS if you're interested in joining any of our panels. Let's go to the next slide. All right.
Yeah, and as always, thank you again to everyone from the anti-trafficking community here in Maryland for joining us today. If you need to make any referrals to the Human Trafficking Prevention Project, please go through their beautiful new website. If you need outreach materials or informational materials from us, you can reach out to the email listed on the screen. And we so appreciate everyone who's been joining us for these last few years for this quarterly webinar series. You can also follow MVLS on social media, where we have information about upcoming trainings and events. This is also part of our third Thursday training series here at MVLS. Lots of series. You can learn lots of things for the next year. So please do join us again.
And I will also add that if you access the MVLS website, you will find a myriad of fact sheets and articles that many of the attorneys at MVLS have written regarding relevant topics. And there's a lot other than the trainings where you can learn and educate on the various topics. And
we will be having a tip sheet, I think both a general MVLS one and one through the HTPP, more tailored to working with survivors of trafficking, speaking to the learnings we've done today and talking about name change here in Maryland. So you'll be able to find that on our website probably in the next month. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Here is all of our, thank you very, very much. Thank you, Heather and Chris. This was wonderful. Such extraordinary presenters. Thank you so much. As we said, we will provide you with the slides and the video. They will be on our website shortly. We will, and this is our information. If you need to contact us for any reason, we're here to help.
Thank you for including me.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.